Hi there, welcome to Hushed History Channel. Tonight we're venturing beyond the edge of the Roman Empire, where the wind cuts through your woolen cloak like a gladius through silk, and the snow doesn't care that you're wearing the armor of the world's greatest military machine. Picture this. You're standing in a frozen highland valley, your breath forming clouds in the bitter dawn air, and you've just realized that half your legion, the men you've marched with for years, have vanished in the night like smoke. Reality check. When you're this far north of Hadrian's Wall in winter, your fancy Roman engineering won't save you. And honestly, you probably won't make it to spring. But hey, at least you'll have a more interesting death than your cousin who choked on a dormouse at that dinner party in Rome. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love knowing whether you're actually using this as a bedtime story or secretly listening at work. Now, let's drift back in time. You're jolted awake by the kind of cold that makes your bones ache, the kind that seeps through your military-issue sagum cloak and reminds you that whoever designed Roman military gear had clearly never spent a winter this far north. Your eyes snap open to see your breath crystallizing in the air above you, and that's when you notice the silence, not the peaceful quiet of a sleeping camp. This is the wrong kind of silence. Pushing yourself up from your bedroll, joints protesting like rusty hinges. You scan the camp through the pre-dawn gloom. The sight that greets you makes your stomach drop faster than a lead sling bullet, where there should be 800 tents arranged in perfect Roman order. You see maybe half that number. Snow has already begun to dust the abandoned leather shelters, and the footprints leading away from camp are being erased by the steady snowfall, like the gods themselves are covering up evidence of desertion. You stumble to the tent of your optio, your second in command, and find it empty except for his vine staff, abandoned on the frozen ground. The symbol of his rank, the thing he'd literally beat men with to maintain discipline, just left behind. That tells you everything you need to know about how bad things have gotten. The few sentries still at their posts look at you with hollow eyes. They're the ones too loyal, too stupid, or too frozen to run. One of them, a young kid from Gaul who still hasn't figured out how to wrap his scarf properly to keep his ears from turning blue, croaks out what you already know. They left in the third watch, sir. Took what supplies they could carry. Historians still argue whether mass desertion events like this were common in frontier legions, or if the sources exaggerate for dramatic effect. But standing here in this half-empty camp, academic debates feel pretty pointless. What matters is that you're now the ranking officer of what's left of the 9th Legion's 3rd cohort, stuck somewhere in Caledonia, with winter setting in like an unwelcome house guest who's planning to stay for months. The wind picks up, driving snow horizontally across the camp, and you catch yourself thinking about that warm bathhouse back in Iberacum. You know, the one where the biggest worry was whether the olive oil was fresh. Good times. But that's probably, 300 miles south. Might as well be in Egypt for all the good it does you now. The attack comes 3 days later, just as you're leading what's left of your sentry through a narrow glen that the local guide swears is a shortcut. You should have known better. When has a local guide in enemy territory ever led Romans anywhere good? But desperation makes fools of us all. And your men need to believe you know where you're going, even if you're basically following a dirt track that could lead to Londinium or straight off a cliff. The mist is so thick you can barely see the man in front of you, which should have been your second warning. The first warning was probably the complete absence of bird sounds, but you'd written that off to the weather. You're about to call a halt when the world explodes into chaos. They come from above, from the slopes you couldn't see through the fog, painted in blue woad and screaming like the Furies themselves. Your training kicks in, form testudo, but half your men are already down, caught mid-stride with spears through their throats. The famous Roman discipline means nothing when you can't see your enemy until they're close enough to smell the bear grease in their hair. A warrior lands on your shield, literally drops from somewhere above like a demented acrobat, and you get a face full of matted beard and bad breath before you manage to throw him off. His axe catches your helmet, spinning it sideways, and suddenly you're fighting half-blind while some Caledonian berserker tries to introduce your intestines to the Scottish morning air. Your legate, the one who'd been so confident about this punitive expedition to teach the tribes a lesson, takes a spear through the eye while trying to rally the aqualifer. You watch him drop like a sack of grain, his fancy purple cloak immediately trampled into the mud by panicking soldiers. There's something grimly poetic about that, though you don't have time to appreciate it as you're busy trying not to join him. The ambush is perfectly executed. And here's the disturbing part. These aren't mindless barbarians. They know Roman tactics, so they're hitting your formation at the exact points where it's weakest, targeting officers and standard bearers first. Someone's been studying you, learning from every frontier skirmish, every failed negotiation, every Roman who thought superior technology meant inevitable victory. You manage to form a rough circle with maybe 30 men, shields locked, stabbing blindly into the mist at shapes that appear and disappear like phantoms. The famous gladius, perfectly designed for close combat, feels about as useful as a butter knife when you can't see what you're stabbing at. Meanwhile, their longer swords and spears are finding gaps in your formation with disturbing regularity. Then, as suddenly as it began, it's over. The screaming fades, replaced by the groans of the wounded and that horrible gurgling sound dying men make when they're trying to breathe through blood. The mist starts to clear, and you finally see the full scope of the disaster. Bodies everywhere. Roman bodies, specifically. Your century of 80 men is down to maybe 25 who can still stand, and half of those are bleeding from various creative wounds. The barbarians, Caledonians, Picts, whatever they're calling themselves this week, have melted back into the landscape like they were never there. They've even taken some of your wounded, which, yeah, you don't want to think too hard about what that means. Your aqualifer is somehow still alive, clutching the Legion's eagle standard like it's the only thing keeping him upright. His left arm is hanging at an angle arms shouldn't hang at, but bless him, he hasn't let go of that golden bird. That's Roman stubbornness for you. Dying empire, freezing weather, surrounded by enemies, but by Jupiter's hairy backside, we're keeping the fancy pole with the chicken on top. Mainstream history tells us the Caledonians used guerrilla tactics against Roman forces, but what they don't always mention is how psychologically devastating these ambushes were. You're trained to fight in formation, to trust the man beside you, to follow orders. When that system breaks down, when you're scattered and confused and your leaders are face down in the mud, you're just scared men in heavy armor that suddenly feels more like a death trap than protection. The quirky detail? Some historians think the blue woad war paint wasn't just for intimidation. It might have had antiseptic properties. So while your wounded are probably going to die from infection, any Caledonians you manage to scratch are painting themselves with primitive antibiotics. Ancient biotechnology. 1. Roman superiority complex. 0. You do a quick head count and realize the horrible truth. From your original cohort of 480 men, you're down to maybe 150 scattered across 3 different groups that got separated in the ambush. The other sentries might be dead, might be captured, might be wandering around in the mist trying to find you. But standing here, surrounded by dead friends and the growing realization that no one back in Eberacum even knows where you are, you understand that you're not a sentry anymore. You're not even a proper contubernium. You're just survivors. The next week blurs together like a fever dream as you stumble through hostile territory, gathering survivors like some morbid shepherd collecting very traumatized sheep. You find pockets of men huddled in caves, hiding in abandoned shepherds' huts, or just wandering in circles, still clutching their scooter shields like rectangular security blankets on. Each group has the same hollow-eyed look, the same story of ambush and scatter, the same dawning realization that the 9th Legion, the proud Hispana, is effectively gone. Your makeshift command post is a wind-blasted grove of pine trees where you've ordered everyone to converge. The password is Vespasian's beard, which seemed funny when you picked it, but now just reminds everyone of better times, when your biggest worry was impressing some long-dead emperor. Men trickle in over days, some alone, some in groups, all looking like they've aged a decade in a week. The count is brutal. You started with close to 5,000 men when the Legion marched north. Now, squatting in this freezing grove counting heads like some demented census taker, you've got maybe 800. 800 out of 5,000. That's not a defeat. That's an erasure. The kind of loss that gets removed from official records because nobody back in Rome wants to explain how an entire legion just evaporated. Among the survivors, you've got a bizarre mix. 3 centuries worth of infantry, sure, but also cooks, engineers, a very confused military surgeon who keeps muttering about humoral imbalances, 2 priests, one for Mars, one for Mithras. They're not speaking to each other. And somehow, inexplicably, the guy whose only job was maintaining the commander's armor, the commander who is now very dead and very not in need of shiny breastplates. Sir, your newly promoted Optio says, promoted meaning he's the only surviving officer besides you. The men want to know the plan. He's a Batavian auxiliary who goes by Marcus now, but whose real name sounds like someone choking on porridge. Good soldier. Terrible situation to get your first command experience. The plan. Right. You should have one of those. You look at your officers. A generous term for the ragtag group of surviving principals. There's the Aquilifer still death-gripping that eagle standard. A signifer from the 2nd cohort whose standard is now just a stick. The actual signum is decorating some Caledonian's hut. And a Tesserarius who's approximately 12 years old but swears he's 18. This is your brain trust. May the gods help you all. We can't go south, you announce, trying to sound more confident than you feel. The tribes will be watching the obvious routes. This is military speak for, they'll murder us in our sleep if we try. Everyone nods like this is brilliant strategic insight, rather than basic common sense. The surgeon, who's been examining the wounded with the enthusiasm of someone who knows he's out of actual medicine, pipes up. Half these men won't survive a long march, especially him. He points to a legionary whose leg is doing interesting things with color. Purple is not a shade human limbs should be. Historians still argue whether Roman military medicine was advanced for its time, or just enthusiastic guesswork with wine and prayers. Looking at your surgeon trying to treat frostbite with a mixture of vinegar and what might be moss, you're leaning toward the latter. The real issue isn't even the wounded, it's everything else. You've got maybe 2 weeks of food if everyone eats half rations. Your armor is designed for Mediterranean summers, not Scottish winters. minor detail, you have absolutely no idea where you are beyond somewhere north of the wall. Probably one of the engineers, a Syrian who joined up for citizenship and is definitely regretting that decision, raises a practical point. We need shelter, proper shelter, not Roman temporary camps, something that'll last the winter. He's already sketching in the dirt with a stick, designing what looks like a cross between a Roman fortification and whatever hovels the locals live in. That's when old Gaius speaks up. He's auxiliary cavalry, technically not even a proper legionary, but he's been on the frontier for 20 years and has that grizzled veteran look that makes young soldiers instinctively straighten up. I know a place, he says, and everyone turns to stare. Turns out, during a long-range patrol years ago, Gaius found an abandoned settlement tucked in a valley about 3 days north. Good water, stone buildings, defensible. The tribes avoid it, say it's cursed. He shrugs. Can't be worse cursed than staying here. The fun historical tidbit? Archaeological evidence suggests several lost Roman outposts in Scotland that don't match any official records. Either someone was running unofficial settlements, or, and here's the spicy possibility, deserters and survivors were setting up their own little Roman communities far from imperial oversight. You make the call. North to this possibly cursed, probably frozen, definitely better than dying here valley. It's not exactly the triumphant return to civilization you'd hoped for, but at least it's a plan. As you organize the march, separating the walking wounded from the drag them on a sledge wounded, you catch yourself thinking that somewhere in Rome, they're probably already writing you off as dead. Joke's on them. You're too cold to die. 3 days of stumbling through frozen heather and dodging Caledonian patrols later. You crest a ridge and see it, Gaius's promised valley. Even through exhaustion-blurred vision, you have to admit it's perfect. Nestled between steep hills like a cupped palm, with a stream running through the center that hasn't frozen solid yet, and stone buildings that look ancient but mostly intact. The place has that eerie, abandoned quality, like everyone just vanished mid-meal. But after sleeping in snow caves and under pine branches, it looks like the forum of Rome itself. Why would anyone abandon this? Europtio mutters. And honestly, that's a great question. The settlement has everything. Defensive positions, fresh water, even what looks like cultivated fields now covered in snow. But the Caledonians Gaius bribed for information were clear. This place is forbidden, cursed by their gods, avoided by anyone with sense, which apparently makes it perfect for a bunch of desperate Romans who stopped having sense somewhere around the third frostbitten toe. The buildings are a mix of styles, round stone houses with conical roofs that the locals favor, but also some rectangular structures that look almost Roman, or at least Roman adjacent, like someone described Roman architecture to someone who'd never seen it, and they gave it their best shot. The walls are solid though, thick stone that's weathered who knows how many winters. More importantly, most still have roofs. You set up a command post in what must have been the chieftain's hall, a long stone building with a central hearth and actual, honest-to-Mars wooden benches. After weeks of sitting on frozen ground, those benches might as well be silk cushions. Your aqualifer plants the eagle standard in the center of the hall with the solemnity of someone claiming new territory for Rome, even though Rome has no idea you're here and probably wouldn't care if they did. The men don't need orders to start exploring. They scatter through the settlement like kids in a candy shop. If candy shops were abandoned stone villages that might be cursed. Within an hour, reports start coming in, and they're surprisingly good. The granaries still have some grain, mouse-eaten and questionable, but grain nonetheless. There's a well in the center of the settlement that isn't frozen. Some buildings even have metal tools left behind, rusted but salvageable. It's like they just left, the Syrian engineer says, running his hands along the stonework. No signs of battle, no burned buildings. They just walked away. He's already mentally calculating repairs. You can see it in his eyes. Give an engineer a problem, and he's happy. Even if that problem is, how do we turn this ghost town into a Roman fort before we freeze to death? The quirky historical detail nobody mentions. Archaeological digs have found Roman coins and military equipment in the strangest places throughout Scotland, way beyond where any official records say Romans went. Your little occupation of a cursed village might not be as unique as you think. Maybe the empire was always more about individual survival than grand strategy, once you got far enough from Rome. By nightfall, you've got men in every salvageable building. The wounded are clustered near the main hall, where your surgeon has set up what he generously calls a hospital. It's really just a room with a fire and relatively clean straw. But compared to dying in a snowbank, it's practically divine intervention. The Mithras priest is already planning where to set up a proper Mithraeum, because apparently maintaining proper religious facilities is essential when you're literally fighting for survival. Priorities. The real fine comes from the auxiliaries who've been poking around the edges of the settlement. They discover storage pits, the kind the locals use to hide grain from raiders, and several are still sealed. Inside, wrapped in oiled leather, are supplies that make your supply officer actually weep. Grain, preserved meat, even some clay jars of what might be beer, or might be something that'll blind you. Either way, the men are calling it divine providence. Historians still argue whether the Picts and Caledonians had permanent settlements or were mostly nomadic, but this place suggests they knew a thing or two about long-term planning. The buildings are positioned to block the worst of the wind. The drainage system actually works, and someone put serious thought into defense. The only approach is up a narrow valley that 20 men could hold against hundreds. Home sweet home, you mutter, watching your men actually smile for the first time in weeks as they light fires in proper hearths. Sure, it's not Iberacum with its bathhouses and proper latrines, but it's shelter, it's defensible, it's a chance. Your Optio appears at your elbow, ever the voice of practical concern. The locals will know we're here within days, smoke from the fires, if nothing else. You nod. Let them know. We're not hiding. We're surviving. Big difference. The abandoned settlement spreads before you in the dying light. Your 800 men moving through it like ghosts haunting ghosts. Tomorrow, you'll start the real work, fortifying, organizing, figuring out how to make this place a functioning Roman outpost instead of just a very comfortable grave. But tonight you have roofs over your heads and fires in the hearths. In the corner of the main hall, someone's already started scratching Legio 9 into the stonework. Because what's the point of surviving if you can't leave graffiti for future archaeologists to puzzle over? Dawn finds you standing in the snow with your Syrian engineer, both of you staring at a partially collapsed wall, like it personally offended your mothers. We can fix this, he says with the confidence of someone who once saw a picture of a wall around you. The valley echoes with the sound of Roman military efficiency applied to decidedly non-military construction. It's like watching the world's most dangerous home renovation show. First priority, you announce at morning assembly, your breath fogging in the cold air, is making this place livable. I want every man who can hold a tool working, masons, carpenters, anyone who ever helped their dad fix a fence. You're all engineers now. The actual engineers look mildly offended, but desperate times call for desperate job descriptions. The work parties organize with surprising efficiency. Your legion might be shattered, but muscle memory runs deep. Sentries become construction crews. Contuberniums transform into specialized work units. The weapons drill instructors are now teaching men how to properly thatch a roof, which is hilarious until you realize your life might literally depend on keeping the rain out. The stroke of genius comes from, of all people, the cook. Why don't we build hypercausts, he suggests, and everyone stares at him like he suggested you all grow wings and fly home. But he persists. I helped build the ovens at Vindolanda. Same principle. Hot air under the floors. We've got stone. We've got fuel. We've got men who dug latrines for punishment detail and know how to move earth. Your Syrian engineer's eyes light up like someone just explained aqueducts to him for the first time. Within hours, he's got men digging channels under the largest buildings, planning a heating system that would make a Roman bathhouse architect weep with envy. Or horror. Possibly both. The abandoned settlement becomes a hive of activity. Men who spent years perfecting the art of stabbing barbarians are now learning the delicate craft of not collapsing stone walls on themselves. Your centurions adapt their command style from form testudo to no you idiot. The support beam goes there. It's surprisingly similar, lots of yelling, occasional threats of decimation, but now with more carpentry. Some discoveries make the work easier. The original builders used a mortar mixture that your engineers can't quite replicate, but they improvise with local clay and what might generously be called experimental binding agents. One building has what looks like a primitive aqueduct system, just channels cut in rock to direct stream water, but is genius in its simplicity. Your men expand it, adding Roman improvements like settling tanks and covered channels. The quirky historical note: Roman concrete was genuinely superior to anything else available for centuries, but the exact recipe was lost when the empire fell. Your engineers, trying to recreate it from memory and desperation, are probably creating some bizarre hybrid that future archaeologists will spend decades trying to understand. Why does this mortar contain so much horsehair and what appears to be fermented grain? They'll ask. The answer is because Quintus the Mason was drunk and creative. Defensive positions come next. The settlement already has natural protection, but Roman paranoia demands improvement. You've got men building proper gates at the valley entrance, raising watchtowers on the surrounding heights, and someone's even started on what looks suspiciously like a miniature vallum, because if you're going to squat in an abandoned village, you might as well squat defensively. The Mithras priest, not to be outdone, has claimed a cave at the back of the valley for his Mithraeum. He's got soldiers who should be building walls instead, carving a rough altar and painting bulls on the ceiling with a mixture of ochre and what's definitely not regulation pigment. The Mars priest is constructing a shrine from a pile of rocks that he swears form the shape of a spear if you squint and have recently suffered head trauma. 3 weeks in, and the transformation is remarkable. Buildings that were empty shells now have solid roofs, functioning doors, and in some cases, actual heated floors. The hypercore system works. After a fashion, meaning it produces more smoke than heat, but nobody's frozen to death yet, so you're calling it a win. The main hall has become a proper Principia, complete with a shrine to the standards, and a desk where you pretend to write reports that no one will ever read. Historians still argue whether Roman military engineering was adaptable or just stubbornly consistent regardless of environment. Looking at your Fort Village hybrid, with its Roman gates protecting Celtic roundhouses and hypocourse heating buildings older than the empire, you'd say it's both. You're not abandoning Roman methods, you're just aggressively reinterpreting them. The best part? The men have stopped looking like walking corpses. Having a purpose beyond "try not to die today" has revived something in them. They're still stuck in a possibly cursed valley, surrounded by enemies in the middle of winter. But now they're stuck with heated floors and proper latrines. It's the little things. Your Optio reports that the scouts have seen locals watching from the ridgelines. They haven't attacked, just observed. Maybe they're impressed by your construction skills. Maybe they're waiting for their gods to strike you down for occupying cursed land. Maybe they're taking bets on how long before you accidentally burn the place down trying to heat it. Whatever the reason, you've bought time. Your little valley is becoming less abandoned settlement and more the world's most remote Roman outpost. Now you just have to figure out how to feed everyone through winter, which is a slightly different engineering problem. She appears on a foggy morning while you're inspecting the new gatehouse, materializing from the mist like something out of a Celtic nightmare story. Your sentries nearly turn her into a pincushion before they realize she's alone, unarmed, and carrying what looks like a basket of herbs. She's maybe 40 winters, dressed in local fashion, wool and fur and more wool. But when she speaks, the words that come out freeze everyone in place. "Salvete, Romani," she says, and her Latin is accented but clear. "I hear you've occupied the empty place. My grandmother said you would return eventually." Your hand goes to your gladius out of pure instinct, but she just smiles like she's watching a puppy try to look fierce. "I'm not here to fight. I'm here because your men are doing the healing wrong. And if you keep packing wounds with whatever that is," she gestures toward your hospital building, "you'll lose more to fever than you did to warriors." The standoff lasts about 30 seconds before your surgeon hurries forward. Professional curiosity overcoming caution. He's been losing men to infection at a rate that would make a gladiator school proud. And desperation makes strange bedfellows. Within minutes, they're comparing notes on wound treatment. And you're left standing there wondering how your military occupation just turned into a medical conference. Her name is Brigantia. Of course it is. Probably as real as your men calling themselves Marcus. And her story is the kind that makes historians reach for the wine. Her grandmother was Roman. She claims, captured or rescued. The story changes depending on who's asking. By locals after a skirmish decades ago. Learned the healing arts from both traditions, passed them down. And now, here's Brigantia, speaking Latin to a bunch of Romans who shouldn't exist. "There were others," she says casually, grinding something pungent with a mortar and pestle she's produced from somewhere. "Romans who stayed, married local women, raised children who spoke both tongues. Most are gone now, died or moved deeper into the highlands, but the knowledge remains. The mainstream historical record says Roman deserters were hunted down and executed. But here's someone claiming they integrated into local populations. It's the kind of detail that doesn't make it into official reports because it's embarrassing. Mighty Rome soldiers going native? Better to pretend they all died heroically. Your surgeon is practically vibrating with excitement as she shows him local remedies. This moss, it grows on the north side of oaks. Pack wounds with it. And this. She holds up something that looks like tree bark. Boil it. Make the men with fever drink the water. Your Roman medicines ran out weeks ago, yes? Time to learn new ways. The quirky detail that would blow future minds. Some of these Celtic remedies actually work. That moss she's talking about has antimicrobial properties. The bark contains something similar to aspirin. Your surgeon doesn't know why they work, but he's documenting everything with the fervor of someone who's discovered that not all medical knowledge comes from Galen. She stays for 3 days, teaching anyone who'll listen. Your men are suspicious at first. This could be poison, could be witchcraft, could be Tuesday for all they know about local customs. But when the fever cases start recovering instead of dying, when wounds stop festering, even the most Roman of Romans starts paying attention. Why help us? You finally ask her on her last evening. You're sharing what passes for dinner, grain porridge with mystery meat that's definitely not regulation rations, in the main hall. She gives you a look that suggests you're not as clever as you think. Because wounded men are wounded men. Because my grandmother's songs spoke of Roman kindness as well as Roman cruelty. Because, and here she smiles, winter is long, and if you all die, who will I trade with for those nice metal tools you're making? Ah, practical Celtic wisdom. You can respect that. Before she leaves, she provides one more service. She points out which locals might trade with you, which valleys to avoid unless you fancy being sacrificed to someone's tree god, and most importantly, which plants will kill you versus which ones just taste like death. Your cooks take fervent notes. One more thing, she says, as she prepares to disappear back into the mist. The curse on this place, it's not what you think. The gods aren't angry about people living here. They're angry about people leaving. Stay, survive, prosper. The curse breaks. Run like the others did? She shrugs eloquently. Historians still argue whether Celtic curse beliefs were religious or practical warnings dressed up in mysticism. Looking at this perfectly situated valley that everyone avoids, you're starting to think it might be both. Maybe the curse is just another word for, if you abandon sustainable settlements for stupid reasons, bad things happen. After she's gone, your camp has a different energy. It's not just the improved medical care, though watching fewer men die certainly helps morale. It's the realization that you're not completely alone up here. There are people beyond your walls who don't automatically want you dead. Some of them even speak Latin and know things that might keep you alive. Your surgeon has become insufferably smug, ordering men to collect specific plants and experimenting with combinations that smell like death but apparently prevent it. The Mithras priest is having theological discussions about whether using pagan healing magic violates his vows. The Mars priest just wants to know if any of the herbs make good ritual incense. You're writing in your journal by lamplight, documenting this bizarre turn of events. When you realize something, you're not just building a fort anymore. You're building something else, something that isn't quite Roman, isn't quite Celtic, but might just work. Tomorrow you'll send out your first official trade delegation. Tonight, you're just grateful that someone up here prefers living Romans to dead ones. The transformation begins with the Marcus Flavius throwing his gladius at a rabbit and missing by approximately the width of Hadrian's wall. In Jupiter's name, he curses, watching his dinner hop away. How do the barbarians make this look easy? That's when you realize your elite Roman killing machines are about as suited to highland hunting as a trireme is to mountain climbing. Your food situation has become what military historians would call critically suboptimal, which is fancy talk for we're eating boot leather soup again. The grain from the storage pits is running low. Your supply train is several hundred miles and one massive hostile territory away. And the local wildlife has apparently attended advanced Roman avoidance training. Enter Cormac, a local hunter who looks like he was carved from the same granite as the mountains. He shows up at your gates one morning with a deer slung over his shoulders and a proposition. He'll teach your men to hunt if you'll trade metal tools. Your blacksmith nearly weeps. He's been melting down spare equipment anyway. Might as well get dinner out of it. First problem, Cormac says, eyeing your men's armor with amusement. You sound like thunderstorm walking through forest. Deer hear you from next valley. He's not wrong. A Roman legionary in full kit makes about as much noise as a percussion ensemble falling downstairs. So begins the strangest training program in Roman military history. Soldiers who've spent years learning to fight in perfect formation are now learning to move silently through heather. Men who pride themselves on discipline and order are being taught to think like prey animals, to read wind patterns, to identify game trails versus paths that lead to angry bear. The hunting parties look ridiculous at first. Romans in bits of fur and wool, faces smeared with mud, trying to creep through the undergrowth while still unconsciously maintaining proper interval spacing. One sentry accidentally forms a testudo while stalking a deer herd. The deer, unsurprisingly, notice the rectangular shield formation advancing on them. But hunger is an excellent teacher. Within weeks, your men are bringing back game. Not much at first, rabbits, the occasional grouse. One memorable incident with a wildcat that left 3 men scratched and everyone else laughing. But it's protein that doesn't come from increasingly suspicious preserved meats. The real breakthrough comes when Cormac teaches them about driving hunts. You Romans good at group work, he says, which might be the understatement of the century. Use that. Some men drive, others wait with spears, like battle, but deer don't have swords. Your centurions immediately grasp the concept and turn it into a military operation. They draw up hunt plans like battle strategies, complete with contingencies for what if the deer go left and secondary kill zones. It's completely over-engineered and surprisingly effective. Turns out centuries of coordinated combat training translates well to coordinated deer murder. The quirky historical detail: Roman soldiers were actually prohibited from hunting in many provinces. It was considered a distraction from military duties and reserved for the upper classes. Here you are, turning your entire remaining legion into poachers. If any military inspectors show up, you'll have some explaining to do. Good thing the nearest inspector is probably warm and comfortable in Londinium, not trudging through frozen peat bogs looking for regulation violations. Fishing becomes another survival skill. The stream running through your valley has fish, small, bony things that taste like mud, but still technically edible. Your engineers, because engineers can't help themselves. Design elaborate fish traps using the same principles as siege equipment. It's like watching someone use a ballista to swat flies, but it works. Some men take to this new life better than others. The auxiliaries, especially the Germans and Gauls, adapt quickly. Turns out they grew up doing this stuff before Rome civilized them into formation fighting. The Italian-born legionaries struggle more, muttering about how this isn't what they signed up for while gnawing on rabbit bones. The funniest adaptation is weapons. Your regulation pila are useless for hunting, too heavy, too obvious, too, please alert every animal in 3 miles that Romans are coming. But the local spears, perfect, light, balanced, throwable. Within a month, half your men are carrying Celtic hunting spears alongside their military gear. Traditional Roman values are colliding with Celtic practicality. And practicality is winning by knockout. Food storage becomes the next challenge. Smoking meat, drying it, preserving it for the long winter ahead. Your cooks, used to working with regular supplies and established methods, have to learn entirely new techniques. The Celtic method involves a lot more peat smoke and salt than Roman tastes prefer. but hunger makes everything delicious. Historians still argue whether Roman military diet was actually as grain-dependent as sources suggest, or if local adaptation was more common than reported. Watching your men trade armor pieces for knowledge about which mushrooms won't kill you. You suspect the official records left out a lot of embarrassing details about imperial survival. The best part? Your men are getting good at this, really good. The hunting parties move like ghosts now, communicate with hand signals adapted from battlefield commands, and bring back enough game to supplement the grain rations. They're still Roman soldiers, but Roman soldiers who can track a deer through morning mist and know which berries mean dessert versus death. You're watching a successful hunt return. 8 deer carried by men who look more like Celtic warriors than Roman legionaries. When your Optio makes an observation, we're not trying to make Britannia like Rome anymore. We're becoming something new. He's right. You're still flying the Eagle standard, still maintaining discipline and order. But now it's Roman discipline applied to Highland survival. It's working better than anyone could have expected, which probably means something's about to go horribly wrong. The moment comes on a bitter evening when your quartermaster presents his latest inventory. "Sir," he says with the careful tone of someone delivering terrible news, "we're out of regulation equipment, completely. Every spare pilum head, every extra scutum boss, every backup gladius, all gone or broken beyond repair." He pauses, gathering courage for the real bombshell. The Aquilifer wants to know if we should melt down the standards for tool metal. The silence in the command tent could be cut with a gladius, if you had any spare gladii, which you don't. The Eagle standard, the very soul of the legion, reduced to cooking pots and hunting spears. It's the kind of sacrilege that would have you crucified in civilized lands. But civilization is very far away, and you can't eat symbolism. How much metal are we talking about? You hear yourself asking. And part of your soul dies at the pragmatism in your voice. Your Aquilifer, bless him, looks like someone asked him to strangle his own mother. The Eagle alone is substantial, plus the other standards, the decorative elements, the bronze fittings we've been hoarding. He swallows hard. Enough for maybe 50 spearheads and various tools. The debate that follows would make Senate discussions look orderly. The Mithras priest argues for preserving religious items. The Mars priest counters that Mars would prefer his followers alive with improvised weapons rather than dead with pretty standards. Your surviving centurions are split between tradition and practicality. Someone suggests melting only the lesser standards, keeping the Eagle. But that's like saying, let's only commit light sacrilege. It's young Lucius who breaks the deadlock. He's maybe 19, promoted to Optio because everyone senior to him is dead, and he has the unfortunate clarity of youth. The Eagle represents the Legion's spirit, right? Well, the spirit is us, not the metal. If we die clutching our symbols, the Legion dies with us. If we live, even with melted eagles, the Legion lives from the mouths of babes and desperate soldiers. The decision made. The transformation is almost ritualistic. Your blacksmith, a Gaul who joined for citizenship and is probably regretting that decision, sets up his forge with unusual ceremony. Men gather to watch as the standards are carefully, respectfully dismantled. The Aquilifer personally removes the Eagle from its staff, cradling it like a child before placing it in the forge. Watching Roman symbols melt into puddles of useful metal is surreal. That bronze that once inspired men to march across the world is becoming a cooking pot. That decorative victory wreath from some forgotten triumph It's now 3 hunting knives. The legion's pride, literally transformed into survival tools. But here's the thing. The men don't break. You expected riots, expected the religious types to have meltdowns, expected desertions. Instead, there's a grim acceptance, even a dark humor. At least we'll eat our shame from nice bowls. Someone jokes, and the laughter is only slightly hysterical. The real innovation comes from the engineers. With proper Roman equipment gone, they start experimenting with local materials. That bog iron the Celts use, turns out it makes decent spearheads if you know what you're doing. Your Syrian engineer discovers that mixing it with scrap metal from armor produces something workable, not Legion standard, but probably won't snap when you stab someone standard. Tools become weapons. Weapons become tools. A gladius with a broken tip becomes a hunting knife. Pilum shafts become walking sticks, fishing spears, tent poles. Nothing is wasted. Your armor, designed for Mediterranean sun, gets lined with fur. Helmets gain leather flaps for ear protection. Regulation gives way to innovation, gives way to whatever keeps us alive. The quirky historical note? Archaeologists find the weirdest stuff at Roman sites. Military equipment modified in ways that would horrify traditionalists. Standard helmets with non-standard additions. Weapons clearly reforged from other weapons. Roman designs merged with local patterns. Your improvised armory would fit right in. New weapons emerge from necessity. The Celtic longsword design makes sense when you're fighting in forests instead of formations. Their spears are better balanced for throwing at deer or Caledonians, the two primary threats these days. Some men craft hybrid weapons, Roman grip, Celtic blade, held together with hope and good leather wrapping. The strangest moment comes when a hunting party returns with captured Caledonian weapons. Instead of displaying them as trophies, the men immediately start discussing their practical applications. "Look at this axe balance," one says admiringly. "And the grip wrapping, much better in wet conditions." It's like watching a wine tasting, but for implements of death. Your old training routines adapt to new realities. Morning drill still happens, but now it includes spear throwing at moving targets, small unit tactics for forest fighting, and what one centurion calls aggressive foraging formations. The men still snap to attention, still follow orders, but now they do it while carrying Celtic spears and wearing fur-lined armor that would make a regulation inspector weep. Historians still argue whether Roman military success came from superior equipment or superior organization. Watching your men maintain disciplined combat effectiveness with improvised weapons and melted eagles, you're pretty sure it was the latter. The tools were just tools. The system was what mattered. The blacksmith shows you his latest creation, a spearhead made from the melted eagle, stamped with Ix, just so everyone knows where it came from. It's blasphemy and practicality wrapped in bronze. You approve it for production. That night, you dream of explaining this to a Senate committee. "Well, senators, we melted the sacred standards to make cooking pots and hunting spears." In the dream, they sentence you to something horrible. You wake up laughing because really, what could they do that winter isn't already doing? The fever arrives like an unwelcome relative during Saturnalia, unexpected, demanding, and determined to ruin everything. It starts with Quintus the brickmaker, who everyone jokes couldn't get sick if he tried. Within 3 days, he's burning hot enough to forge metal on his forehead, and 20 more men are showing the same symptoms. Your surgeon takes one look at the spreading illness and uses his favorite medical phrase, "This is not good." In a proper Roman fort, You'd have a valetudinarium, a military hospital with actual supplies, trained staff, maybe even those nice ceramic bedpans that make being sick slightly less undignified. Here, you've got a repurposed roundhouse, dwindling wine supplies for cleaning wounds, and whatever herbs Brigantia left behind with instructions your surgeon only half understood. Medical care has become dangerously creative. It's the sweating sickness. Your surgeon announces after examining patient number 30. I've seen it before, in Germania. We lost half a cohort. He pauses, clearly editing his next words. Of course, we had proper medicine then. The symptoms are brutal: fever, sweating that soaks through bedding, delirium that has men calling for their mothers in languages you didn't know they spoke. The smell in the makeshift hospital is indescribable, though your surgeon tries anyway. Like a fish market in August had a baby with a tannery. Poetry isn't his strong suit. Traditional Roman medicine involves a lot of bloodletting, which seems counterproductive when men are already leaking fluids from every pore. Your surgeon tries it anyway on the first few patients because medical tradition dies hard. When they die harder, he abandons Galen's teachings faster than a politician abandons campaign promises. Enter the Celtic remedies, stage left. That bark tea Brigantia taught you to make, you're brewing it by the gallon. The moss poultices, applied to anyone who'll hold still. Some auxiliaries suggest their own tribal remedies. One Batavian swears by a concoction involving fermented mare's milk and herbs that smell like wet dog. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and these are decidedly desperate times. The breakthrough comes from, of all people, the Mithras priest. He's been caring for the sick as part of his religious duties and notices something. The men who recover fastest are the ones we keep drinking water, constantly, even when they throw it back up. It's so simple, it's almost stupid, but it works. Hydration becomes the new religion, enforced with military precision, the quirky medical detail that would baffle future historians. Some of these barbarian remedies actually work better than Roman medicine. That willow bark contains salicylic acid, primitive aspirin, the honey they insist on putting in wounds, natural antibacterial properties. Your surgeon starts keeping detailed notes, creating a medical text that's part Hippocrates, part Celtic wisdom, part desperation. Isolation becomes critical. You quarantine the sick in separate buildings, post guards to enforce it, and threaten creative punishments for anyone breaking quarantine. I'll have you scrubbing latrines with your tongue becomes the go-to threat, though everyone knows you're too short-handed to waste men on punitive latrine duty. The fever peaks after 2 weeks. You're losing 3 or 4 men a day, which sounds manageable until you remember you only have 800 to start with. Every death is a skill set lost, a friend gone, a reminder that Rome is very far away and getting farther. But then, miraculously, the tide turns, whether it's the bark tea, the obsessive hydration, the isolation measures, or just dumb luck. Men start recovering. They're weak as newborn kittens and twice as cranky, but they're alive. Your surgeon actually smiles, which is disturbing enough that several men check themselves for fever. The recovery phase brings its own challenges. Men who've sweated out half their body weight need feeding up, but all you've got is grain porridge and whatever the hunting parties bring back. One recovered soldier jokes that the illness was better than the recovery diet. He's assigned to hunting duty as soon as he can walk, because irony is alive and well in your makeshift fort. Historians still argue whether epidemic disease or enemy action killed more Roman soldiers on the frontier. Looking at your depleted ranks, down another 40 men despite your best efforts, You understand why military records might emphasize glorious battle deaths over inglorious fever deaths. He died charging the enemy sounds better than he died leaking fluids while hallucinating about his childhood dog. The social dynamics shift after the epidemic. Men who nursed each other through fever are bonded in ways that transcending rank or origin. A patrician son from Rome owes his life to a German auxiliary who forced water down his throat for 3 days straight. Traditional hierarchies don't disappear, but they're now filtered through the lens of who kept me alive when I was trying to die. Your surgeon emerges from the crisis transformed. He's abandoned half his Roman medical training, embraced local remedies, and developed a pragmatic approach that horrifies traditional medicine and saves lives in equal measure. He's also started training assistants in his hybrid methods, creating a medical core that Galen would disown, but that actually functions. The abandoned settlement's curse takes on new meaning. Maybe it wasn't about angry gods. Maybe previous inhabitants left because of disease. Your successful management of the epidemic, combining Roman discipline with Celtic medicine, might be what breaks the supposed curse. Or maybe that's just the fever talking. By month's end, the epidemic has burned itself out. You've lost 53 men total, but the survivors are oddly stronger for it. They've faced death without glory, without honor, without even proper Roman medicine, and survived. It's the kind of victory no historian will record, but it matters more than any battle you've won. The first trade negotiation happens by accident when a hunting party stumbles into a group of locals gathering winter berries. Instead of the expected bloodbath, both sides freeze in mutual surprise, weapons half raised, everyone waiting for someone else to make the first catastrophically bad decision. Then Marcus, one of your brighter legionaries who's picked up enough of the local language to be dangerous, slowly lowers his spear and says what might be the most important word in any language: trade. What follows is the most awkward market day in history. Romans and Caledonians standing in a frost-covered clearing, trying to barter through a combination of broken Latin, broken Celtic, and increasingly elaborate hand gestures. Your men offer a bronze cooking pot, formerly part of a century standard, but let's not mention that. The locals counter with a basket of grain. Everyone pretends not to notice the weapons still within easy reach. Word spreads faster than dysentery in a crowded camp. Within days, you're getting reports of similar encounters. A Roman patrol trades spare hobnails for smoked fish. Another group exchanges a broken but fixable iron tool for information about where the good hunting grounds are. It's commerce at spear point, but it's commerce. You decide to formalize things before someone gets stabbed over a disagreement about exchange rates. The location chosen for official trades is a flat meadow visible from your watchtowers, but far enough away that neither side feels trapped. You establish rules, fixed trade days, limited numbers, weapons present but not drawn. It's like creating a market where everyone's simultaneously customer and potential combatant. The first official trade day is tense enough to make your teeth hurt. 50 of your men, armed but not aggressive, meet 30 locals who look like they'd rather be anywhere else but need what you're offering. You've appointed Marcus as chief translator, mainly because he's the only one who can say, "We mean no harm," without accidentally declaring war on their ancestors. The locals want metal, tools, weapons, anything that cuts or holds an edge. You want food, furs, information. The haggling is intense. A broken gladius blade becomes 2 baskets of preserved berries and a promise of more next week. Some bent armor plates transform into smoked venison, and a surprisingly warm winter cloak. Everyone pretends not to notice that you're essentially selling the corpse of Roman military might for dinner. Language becomes crucial. Marcus starts teaching basic Latin to interested locals, while learning more Celtic in return, within weeks. You've got a pidgin developing, part Latin, part Celtic, part pointing at things and grunting. It's linguistic evolution in fast forward, driven by the universal desire to not starve or freeze. The breakthrough comes when Chief Donach arrives personally. He's older, scarred like a practice post, and has the careful eyes of someone who survived by being smarter than he looks. He brings his daughter, who surprises everyone by speaking decent Latin. Apparently, Brigantia wasn't the only one with Roman ancestry in these hills. "You Romans are like bad weather," Donach says through his translator daughter. "You arrive unwanted, cause problems, but can't be gotten rid of, so we adapt." It's either an insult or Celtic philosophy, possibly both. The real negotiation isn't about goods, it's about survival. He knows you're desperate. You know he's curious. Roman metal work and engineering knowledge for food and furs seems like a fair trade when winter's breathing down everyone's necks. The fact that you're technically enemies becomes less relevant than mutual benefit. Quirky historical side note. Roman trade goods show up in the strangest places in Scotland, far beyond any official Roman presence. Historians argue about how they got there, raids, refugees, or regular trade. Watching your men demonstrate hypercourse construction in exchange for grain supplies, you're pretty sure it was all three. Trust builds slowly. The locals start bringing their broken tools for repair. Your smiths are still better than theirs, even with improvised equipment. In return, they teach your men things Romans never bothered learning: which routes survive winter, how to predict weather by watching clouds over specific peaks, why you should never, ever eat the yellow mushrooms, no matter how hungry you are. Some exchanges are pure culture shock. A local woman trades a technique for waterproofing leather using rendered fat and ashes. Your quartermaster nearly weeps with joy. Dry feet might save more lives than swords this winter. In return, she wants to know how Romans make their pottery wheels spin so smoothly. Civilization, it turns out, is mostly about staying dry and making better pots. The comedy comes with marriage negotiations. Some locals hint that alliance marriages might cement the trading relationship. Your men are interested. It's been a long, cold campaign. But Roman military law is fuzzy on whether marrying a technical enemy counts as desertion or diplomacy. You decide not to ask permission you'll never receive and declare it a matter of local customs and frontier flexibility. Historians still argue whether Roman frontier troops commonly married locals, or if the practice was suppressed in official records. Or watching young Gaius making cow eyes at the chief's niece while pretending to demonstrate proper pylon maintenance, you suspect it was common enough that everyone agreed not to write it down. By winter's depth, your trade network extends to 3 villages. You're not exactly welcome, but you're tolerated, which is better than actively hunted. The weekly market has become an event both sides secretly look forward to. Romans get food and warmth. Locals get tools and techniques. Everyone gets to satisfy their curiosity about the enemy. Your Optio summarizes it best. "We came to conquer them for Rome. Now we're trading soup recipes and complaining about the weather together. If this is victory, it's the strangest one I've seen." Strange or not, those soup recipes might keep you alive until spring. The crisis of authority begins, as most Roman crises do, with a lawyer. Well, Technically, Quintus Maximus was a military tribune before the ambush, which means he knows just enough law to be dangerous and just enough about command to be insufferable. He's been recovering from a spectacular case of fever-induced discretion, but now he's back on his feet and ready to remind everyone about proper Roman legal procedure. According to military law, he announces at morning assembly, his voice carrying that special tone of someone about to make everyone's life harder. We need to elect new officers following proper protocols. The emergency command structure was fine for survival, but now we need legitimate authority. You can feel the collective eye roll from 800 men who've been too busy not dying to worry about constitutional niceties. But he's not wrong, and that's the annoying part. Roman military law is clear about succession, proper appointments, and the chain of command. The fact that you're technically in a cursed valley beyond the edge of the world doesn't actually change the regulations. What follows is the most bizarre application of Roman democracy ever attempted. You're holding military elections in a Celtic roundhouse, using wooden tablets because wax is too precious to waste, while men who've gone half native vote on who should lead them in continuing to go full native. It's like the Senate decided to convene in a brothel. Technically legal, deeply weird. The debates are illuminating. Should command go to the highest-ranking survivor? That would be Maximus, God's help you all. Or to whoever's kept the most men alive, that's you. What about the auxiliaries? Do they get a vote? They're not technically citizens, but they're also the reason you know which mushrooms are edible. Democracy is messy when everyone's wearing fur-lined armor and carrying Celtic spears. The compromise that emerges is beautifully Roman in its legal complexity and practically absurd in its implementation. You remain military commander because nobody else wants to figure out the duty rosters. But Maximus becomes civil administrator, a title you invented that sounds official enough to shut him up. The centurions retain their ranks, but with expanded duties that include chief of hunting parties and supervisor of non-standard equipment procurement, aka the guy who trades with locals. The real innovation comes with creating new positions. You need a minister of local relations. Marcus gets that job, mainly because he's the only one who can ask for grain without accidentally proposing marriage. A chief of adapted engineering oversees the hybrid Roman-Celtic building projects. The supervisor of medical integration is your surgeon's new title, which basically means he can use whatever weird bark tea keeps people alive. But the biggest change is the legal code itself. Roman law assumes you're in Rome, or at least in the empire. It has extensive regulations about property rights, but nothing about what if we're squatting in an abandoned settlement that locals say is cursed. It covers military marriages, but not what if the only available brides are from tribes we're technically at war with. So you adapt. The new laws are carved into wooden tablets. Stone is too valuable for legal vanity projects. There are greatest hits of Roman practicality. Theft is still punished, but now includes stealing from local trade partners. Desertion remains a capital offense, but scouting for extended periods while learning local customs is somehow different. Marriage to locals is permitted for the strengthening of frontier alliances, which is bureaucratic speak for "we can't stop it anyway." The quirky historical detail? Roman military law was actually incredibly flexible when it needed to be. Governors had broad powers to interpret regulations for local conditions. You're just taking that principle and stretching it like a physician pulling a dislocated joint back into place. Painful, necessary, and definitely not what the original designers intended. The daily administration becomes surreal. Morning reports still follow Roman format. but now include items like 3 men request permission to marry local women. The Mithras priest wants to officially recognize the local spring goddess to avoid theological conflicts. And someone taught the Caledonians how to make garum, and now they want to trade for more rotten fish sauce. Justice becomes interesting. When a legionary steals from a local trader, you can't just apply Roman law. That would destroy your fragile trade network. But you can't apply Celtic law either. That involves more creative violence than military discipline allows. The solution? A hybrid court where both sides present their case. Punishment involves restitution to the wrong party and extra duties for the thief. It's not in any law book, but it works. Historians still argue whether Roman law was a civilizing force or a tool of oppression. Watching your men create a functional legal system that borrows from both traditions while inventing new solutions for unprecedented problems. You think it might just be a survival mechanism that happens to wear a toga. The document establishing your new laws ends with a phrase that would make Roman jurists weep. These regulations stand until proper Roman authority can be re-established, or until circumstances require further adaptation. It's basically admitting you're making this up as you go, but doing it in proper legal language. Maximus insists on adding a seal to make it official. Since the proper legion seal is now a cooking pot, you use a local craftsman's mark instead. It's a Celtic spiral design that supposedly means continuity, but looks suspiciously like someone got dizzy while carving. That night, you dream of explaining your innovative legal code to a Roman magistrate. In the dream, he sentences you to death for corrupting Roman law. You wake up laughing because honestly, corrupting Roman law is the least of your crimes against tradition. Tomorrow you're holding a joint Roman-Celtic religious ceremony to bless the new laws. The gods, both sets of them, must be so confused. The scout stumbles through your gates on a morning so cold, your breath freezes before it leaves your lips. He's one of yours, Decimus, sent out 2 weeks ago to map the northern valleys, but he looks like he's aged a decade. "Sir," he gasps, frost in his beard crackling as he speaks. "I found them, another century. They're holed up in ruins about 3 days north." The hall goes silent, except for the crackling fire. Another group of Romans, surviving independently? It's like finding out you're not the only person who thought hiding in a cave during Vesuvius was a good idea. Hope and suspicion war in your chest. More Romans mean more strength, but also more mouths to feed and potentially someone who outranks you and has different ideas about survival. You organize an expedition immediately. 20 of your best men, enough to fight if necessary, but not so many that you're weakened if this is a trap. The journey north is brutal. 3 days through terrain that makes your valley look like a pleasure garden. Decimus leads you through passes so narrow you have to walk single file, across frozen streams that crack ominously under Roman boots, and finally to a hillside scattered with ancient stone ruins older than Rome itself. The first sign of Romans is the smell, wood smoke with that distinctive scent of improperly ventilated Roman cooking. Then you spot the sentries, trying to look military while wrapped in so many furs they resemble mobile haystacks. The password exchange is surreal. Senatus Populusque Romanus, whispered between chattering teeth in a Scottish ruin. SPQR never sounded less imperial. Their commander is Marcus Aurelius Corvus, and yes, he's heard all the jokes about his name. He's got 93 men left from the 2nd century, 3rd cohort, and they look rough. Not, "We've had a hard march" rough, but "We've been eating leather and considering whether human meat violates military regulations" rough. His first words after the formal greeting are, "Please tell me you have food." The negotiation happens in what used to be a Celtic temple, identifiable by the carved spirals and the fact that there's still a bloodstain on the altar that everyone's politely ignoring. Corvus outranks you. He's a senior centurion with 15 years' service. By strict military law, he should take command. But his men are starving, sick, and hanging on by pure Roman stubbornness, while yours are, relatively, healthy and supplied. Here's the thing, Corvus says, cutting through protocol with the pragmatism of a desperate man. I can pull rank, take command, and watch my men die because I don't know what you know about surviving here. Or we can work something out that keeps everyone alive and argue about seniority if we ever see Rome again. The negotiation is delicate. His men need food and shelter immediately. Your settlement can support them, but barely. You need every able body for hunting, building, and defense, but his men need recovery time. The solution involves enough compromise to make a politician proud. Corvus remains nominally senior, but you retain operational command of the settlement. His men integrate into your centuries, but keep their unit identity. Resources are pooled, knowledge shared, and everyone pretends this is exactly how the manual says to handle the situation. The real drama comes when the two groups meet. Your men have gone half native, wearing fur and Celtic metalwork, speaking pidgin, some sporting local wives. His men look like proper Romans who've been through hell. Regulation equipment held together with hope. Proper formations even while starving. Clinging to military tradition like a lifeline. The culture clash is immediate. "What in Mars' name are you wearing?" one of his centurions asks, staring at your men's fur-lined armor and Celtic spears. "Warmth and functionality." Your Optio responds, "What are you wearing? Pride and frostbite?" It takes 3 days to move Corvus's men to your valley. They're so weak some have to be carried, but they maintain formation. Standards high, even though their eagles are also missing, presumed melted. The locals watch this procession with interest. More Romans means more trade, but also more mouths competing for resources. Chief Donach sends a message. Your tribe grows, so must your contributions to trade. Integration is challenging. Corvus's men are horrified by your adaptations. Melted eagles, Celtic allies, local marriages. It's like showing up to a family dinner and discovering everyone's converted to mystery cults and eats their garum with honey. But hunger is a powerful motivator. When they see your heated buildings, your food stores, your functioning community, horror gives way to grudging respect. The quirky historical detail. Roman military records show lots of lost units that suddenly reappear years later with suspicious gaps in their documentation. How many were actually scattered groups that reformed, adapted, and collectively agreed never to mention the time they went native to survive? The funniest conflict comes over religious practices. Corvus's men have been maintaining strict Roman observances, including sacrifices they couldn't really afford. Your priests have adapted, incorporating local deities for diplomatic purposes. The theological arguments are intense. You're worshipping Celtic gods. We're establishing divine alliances for tactical advantage. That's literally just worshipping Celtic gods with extra steps. Within a month, the groups have merged into something new. Corvus proves pragmatic, adopting your innovations while adding his own. His men knew techniques yours didn't, had preserved different equipment, remembered different tricks. The combined knowledge makes everyone stronger. Your 800 becomes 900. Not quite a cohort, but far from the scattered survivors you were. Historians still argue whether Roman military success came from rigid discipline or adaptive flexibility. Watching two different survival strategies merge into something stronger than either alone, you're pretty sure it was both. Rome conquered through discipline, but survived through adaptation. The joint command works better than expected. You handle local relations and resource management. Corvus manages military training and defense. Both of you pretend this is definitely covered in regulations somewhere, probably in the appendix no one reads. That night, celebrating the successful merger with carefully rationed wine, someone raises a toast. To the Lost Legion, may we stay lost until we figure out how to explain this to Rome. Spring arrives like a hesitant diplomat, making promises, retreating, then returning with slightly better offers. The snow begins its slow retreat up the mountainsides, revealing a landscape that looks different from the one you stumbled into months ago, where there were desperate shelters. There's now a functioning settlement. Where there were starving soldiers, there's a community that's learned to feed itself. And where there was certainty about returning to Rome, there's now a question hanging in the increasingly warm air. Should you even try? The debate starts innocuously enough. Corvus mentions that the passes will be clear soon, that theoretically you could march south. The silence that follows is heavy with everything unsaid. 900 men unconsciously glance around at what they've built. The heated halls, the workshops producing hybrid Roman Celtic crafts, the small plots already being prepared for planting. Half the men have local wives now, and several have children on the way. It's hard to imagine ordering a pregnant Celtic woman to march to Hadrian's Wall. You call a command meeting in what you've started calling the Principia, though it looks nothing like a proper Roman headquarters. The maps spread on the table are hand-drawn, showing your valley and the surrounding territories, more detailed than any Roman map ever was, because your survival depended on knowing every deer path and hostile village. Let's be honest about our options. You begin, using your "we're about to discuss something unpleasant" voice. We can attempt to return south. We'd have to fight through the same tribes that destroyed us, this time without proper equipment, dragging families and whoever can't make a forced march. Maximus, ever the lawyer, adds the legal perspective. Technically, we're all deserters now. We've been out of contact for over 6 months. Even if we make it back, there will be questions, especially about the melted standards and the, irregular marriages. The young Optio who suggested melting the eagles raises another point. What if Rome doesn't want us back? We're not the 9th Legion anymore. We're something else. Something that might embarrass them more alive than dead. The room erupts in debate. Traditional Romans argue for duty and honor. They signed up to serve Rome, not to become frontier farmers. Pragmatists point out that serving Rome assumes Rome knows or cares that you exist. The married men are conspicuously quiet, but their position is clear. They're not leaving families behind. Chief Donac's daughter arrives with the weekly trade delegation and provides unexpected perspective. Through Marcus's translation, she says, "The tribes are gathering for summer raids. Any large group moving south will be seen as either threat or opportunity. Neither ends well for you." She pauses, then adds with a slight smile, "Besides, you're terrible Caledonians but decent neighbours. We'd rather keep you than see who Rome sends next." The surgeon raises medical concerns. "We have wounded who'll never make a hard march. Women with child, children themselves, now. Do we abandon them, kill them, drag them to die on the road? His voice carries the weight of someone who's kept people alive against odds and doesn't intend to stop now. Corvus, who's been silent, finally speaks. I've served Rome for 18 years, fought from Germania to Britannia, lost more men than I can count for the glory of the empire. He looks around the room. But I've never seen Romans achieve what we have here. We didn't just survive, we adapted. We built something new. The debate continues for days, formally and informally. Men discuss it over evening meals, during hunting parties, while standing watch. The community you've built has its own momentum now. Crops being planted with seed traded from locals, workshops producing goods, children learning both Latin and Celtic from birth. The tipping point comes from an unexpected source. A trader brings news from the south. There's been another uprising near the wall. 2 cohorts were ambushed and destroyed. The governor is pulling forces back, consolidating, preparing for a major campaign. The trader, a pragmatic Gaul, puts it bluntly. They say the 9th was destroyed completely. You're dead men to them. Why resurrect yourselves just to die again? The final vote is remarkably civilized for a military unit deciding to go rogue. You use proper Roman procedure. Wooden tablets, secret ballot. All votes counted equally. Even the auxiliaries vote, because at this point, citizenship distinctions seem quaint. The result, 743 for staying, 156 for attempting return, 23 abstentions, mostly men too drunk on local beer to make decisions. The minority who voted to leave are given a choice. Stay and accept the decision, or take supplies and try for the wall in small groups. Most choose to stay. The bonds forged through winter are stronger than abstract loyalty to distant Rome. 37 men decide to leave, taking their share of supplies and what blessings the priests of both pantheons can provide. Historians still argue whether frontier forces commonly went native or remained loyal to Rome until the end. Watching men who fought for empire choose instead to fight for the community they've built, you suspect the answer varied with every sunrise and every full belly. The decision made. A strange energy fills the settlement. You're not waiting anymore. Not for rescue, not for orders, not for Rome to remember you exist. You're building something intentionally now. The engineers draw up plans for permanent fortifications. The fields are expanded. Trade negotiations become alliance talks. That night, the Mithras priest holds a ceremony. Instead of praying for return to Rome, he prays for the protection of New Hispania, the name that's emerged for your settlement. The Celtic spring goddess gets a mention too, because theological flexibility is another survival skill you've learned. You stand on the watchtower as dawn breaks over your valley, your permanent valley now. The eagle standard may be melted, but the spirit of the legion has transformed into something different. Not Roman, not Celtic, but something new, something that might outlast both. In Rome, you're dead heroes. Here, you're living legends in the making. The transformation from military camp to permanent settlement happens with surprising speed once everyone accepts you're not leaving. Your engineers, freed from the pretense of temporary construction, unleash 18 months of pent-up architectural ambition. Within weeks, they're arguing about aqueduct placement and drafting plans for a bathhouse that would make a frontier town proud, assuming you can figure out how to heat that much water without deforesting the entire valley. We need to think generations, not seasons. Your Syrian engineer explains, sketching what looks suspiciously like a forum in the dirt. Roman planning, Celtic materials, local conditions. We're creating something new. His enthusiasm is infectious, even if his plan to build a hypercore system under every building might be overly ambitious. The real work begins with infrastructure. Proper roads replace worn paths, not Roman standard highways, but packed gravel that won't turn into muddy death traps every spring. The drainage system expands from hope it doesn't flood to actual engineering. Your metal workers, now including local apprentices, set up a proper forge complex using bog iron and whatever scrap remains. Education becomes unexpectedly crucial. You've got Roman children learning alongside Celtic ones, and someone needs to teach them. Old Gaius, who spent years on the frontier, becomes the unlikely schoolmaster. His curriculum is eclectic: Latin letters, Celtic numbers, Roman history, local geography, and practical skills like how not to die in the wilderness. The children switch between languages mid-sentence, creating a pidgin that would horrify purists but works perfectly. Today's lesson, Gaius announces to his mixed class, is why you should never trust Helvetii merchants and how to calculate the area of a field using Roman methods. Education has never been more practical or more bizarre. The marriage situation sorts itself through sheer momentum. Your military chaplains, both Roman priests, eventually give up trying to perform proper Roman ceremonies and develop something hybrid. The Celtic hand-fasting traditions merge with Roman contract law, creating marriages that are legally binding in no jurisdiction, but emotionally valid everywhere. The children from these unions are citizens of nowhere and everywhere, speaking both languages, learning both cultures. Trade expands beyond survival basics. Your metal workers are producing tools that the locals prize, Roman design with Celtic decoration. The pottery workshop creates vessels that would make a Roman merchant wince and a Celtic chief smile. Everything is fusion. From the cooking, garum-seasoned venison, anyone, to the clothing. Togas are out. Fur-lined tunics are in. The military structure evolves rather than disappears. Morning drill still happens, but it includes Celtic fighting techniques. Your sentries patrol not for Rome but for the settlement, maintaining peace between neighboring tribes who've learned that neutral ground for meetings is valuable. You're not an occupying force anymore. You're mediators, peacekeepers, the reliable third party. Chief Donach visits for what he calls alliance formalization, and you call, figuring out what we are to each other. The negotiation happens over several days, lubricated by that beer-mead hybrid someone invented that tastes like regret, but gets you drunk enough not to care. Your people are not conquerors anymore, he observes. Not quite Celtic either. Something between, like tin and copper making bronze, stronger together. The treaty that emerges would baffle Roman lawyers. You're not surrendering or conquering. You're existing. Mutual defense, shared resources, intermarriage rights, and what amounts to dual citizenship for the next generation. It's written in both languages on bronze plates, sealed with both Roman and Celtic symbols. The children are the real bridge. Little Marcus, son of a legionary and a local woman, speaks both languages fluently and can track deer while reciting Virgil. Julia, whose mother was auxiliary cavalry and father was a local smith, is learning metalwork that combines both traditions. They don't see themselves as Roman or Celtic. They're something new, something that doesn't have a name yet. Your scribes start keeping records in both scripts. The daily log becomes a fascinating document, military precision recording civilian life. Third week of Maius, Celtic reckoning of Beltane, planted eastern field with barley. 2 marriages performed. Trade delegation from northern tribes arrived. No hostile contact. Stores adequate. The Mithraeum expands to include local deities, theological flexibility in stone. The Mars altar shares space with Cernunnos. The spring goddess gets offerings alongside Minerva. Your priests have given up on orthodoxy in favor of whatever keeps divine favor. It's either heresy or advanced theology, depending on your perspective. Historians still argue whether Roman culture was a monolith or constantly adapting. Watching your settlement develop its own festivals, Saturnalia with Celtic music, Beltane with Roman wine, you know the answer. Culture is like water. It takes the shape of its container while remaining fundamentally itself. The craft workshops become cultural laboratories. Roman glass-making techniques applied to Celtic designs. Celtic woodworking creating Roman-style furniture. The pottery kiln produces amphorae decorated with spiral patterns that would confuse archaeologists for centuries. Every piece says, "We were here, we were both, we were neither." By summer's end, you're teaching Celtic agricultural techniques to Roman farmers, while local warriors learn Roman formation fighting. The forge produces plowshares and spearheads with equal skill. Children play games that mix Roman dice with Celtic stones, creating entertainment that requires explanation in both languages. The settlement gets an official name, Nueva Hispania in your records, Nueva Hispania in theirs, New Hispania, the place where the lost legion became something else. The boundary stones are carved with both scripts, marking territory that belongs to no empire, but to the people who live there. You're writing evening reports by lamplight when you realize you've stopped dating them by Roman consular years. Now it's year 2 of the settlement, because that's what matters. Not who rules in Rome, but when you planted the first successful crop, outside, someone's playing a Celtic harp while others sing Roman marching songs with local lyrics. It shouldn't work, but it does. Like everything here, it's become its own thing through necessity and time. Tomorrow, you'll teach more local children Latin while learning their stories. You'll negotiate another trade agreement, perform another hybrid marriage, add another brick to this impossible community. You're not preserving Roman culture. You're creating something entirely new. Future archaeologists will puzzle over your remains. Were they Roman, Celtic, both, neither? They'll miss the point. You were survivors who became builders, who became something unprecedented. 20 years. That's how long it's been since the 9th Legion marched north with eagles high and certainty absolute. You know, because young Marcus, the translator who helped broker those first desperate trades, keeps the count carved on a stone in the forum. Yes, you have a forum now. It's smaller than any proper Roman forum and includes a Celtic roundhouse, but it's yours. You're standing in that forum on a crisp autumn morning, watching something that would have been impossible to imagine during that first terrible winter. A wedding between the grandson of a Roman centurion and the daughter of a Caledonian chief. The ceremony is performed in 3 languages, Latin, Celtic, and that hybrid tongue the young people speak that makes elders from both cultures wince. The priest conducting it was born here, trained in both traditions, and sees no contradiction in invoking Jupiter and Cernunnos in the same breath. The crowd is impossible to categorize. Roman faces with Celtic tattoos. Celtic warriors wearing modified lorica. Children who answer to both naming traditions and switch languages mid-sentence without thinking. Your old aqualifer is there, grey-bearded now, watching his grandson hold a standard that combines the eagle with local symbols. Not melted for tools, but transformed into something new. Remember when we thought we'd all die that first winter? Corvus asks, joining you on the steps of what you generously call the Basilica. He's magistrate now, elected by Roman vote and Celtic acclamation, governing through a law code that would make Roman jurists weep and Celtic Brecons scratch their heads. You remember, gods. Do you remember the cold, the hunger, the certainty that you were watching the death of everything you'd known? Now look at it. Terraced fields heavy with harvest, workshops producing goods traded as far as the Antonine Wall, children learning engineering and poetry in equal measure. The stories have already begun. Travelling bards sing of the Ghost Legion, the Romans who died and lived again, who came as conquerors and stayed as neighbours. The tales grow with each telling. You've heard versions where you commanded thousands, where you fought dragons, probably a mistranslation of faced starvation, where the gods themselves blessed your settlement. In Rome, if anyone remembers the ninth at all, you're a cautionary tale, the legion that marched beyond the wall and vanished, proof of barbarian treachery and the dangers of overextension. They'd never believe the truth, that you survived, adapted, and chose to stay, that the lost legion founded something that might outlast the empire itself. Your population has tripled through birth, intermarriage, and the steady trickle of others seeking what you've built. Discharged auxiliaries who heard rumours, local families drawn by prosperity and protection, even a few Roman merchants who came to trade and decided to stay, seduced by profits and the strange peace you've created. The young people are the real miracle. They move seamlessly between worlds, equally comfortable with a stylus or a spear, speaking multiple languages, not as foreign tongues, but as different tools for different tasks. Your grandson, and isn't that a thought? You with grandchildren, is apprenticed to both the Roman engineer and the Celtic metalsmith, learning to build bridges literal and cultural. The old distinctions matter less each year. Who's Roman? Who's Celtic? The boy who recites Virgil while wearing woad, the girl who performs Celtic prophecy using Roman augury techniques, the warriors who patrol in Roman formation using Celtic tracking skills. The categories dissolve like snow in spring, leaving only people. We need to send another embassy south, Marcus reports. He's your foreign minister now, a title that didn't exist in any Roman manual. The new governor wants to know why border raids have stopped in this region. The answer, of course, is that you've created a buffer zone of allied tribes, trade partnerships, and marriages that make raiding counterproductive. Peace through integration rather than domination. Hardly Roman doctrine, but effective. The feast that evening combines the best of both worlds. Roman wine, now produced locally from vines traded from the south, served in Celtic ceremonial horns. Venison prepared with garum and local herbs. Bread baked in Roman ovens from grain grown in Celtic fields. Entertainment that includes both classical recitation and traditional storytelling, sometimes in the same performance. As night falls, you climb the watchtower, the same one you stood on that first spring, wondering if you'd made the right choice. The valley spreads below, lit by hearth fires and torches, alive with the sound of multiple languages and mingled music. The settlement has grown beyond the original boundaries, spreading up the hillsides in terraces that combine Roman engineering with Celtic architectural sense. In the Mithraeum-turned-Pantheon, priests of multiple traditions maintain the sacred flames. In the workshops, apprentices learn techniques that exist nowhere else. In the homes, families tell stories that blend history and myth, creating new legends for a new people. You're not Roman anymore, not Celtic. but something unprecedented, a successful fusion that happened not through conquest, but through necessity and choice. An old Caledonian bard, master of the oral tradition, has been teaching young scribes to record the stories. Words written last longer than memory, he says, but memory holds truth that writing loses. So they do both. Written records in multiple scripts, oral traditions in multiple languages, ensuring that whatever happens, something will survive. The bard's latest song is about the Ghost Legion's transformation. In his version, you were tested by the gods of both peoples and found worthy through adaptation rather than domination. It's mostly fiction, but like all good stories, it holds emotional truth. You did die in a way. The rigid Roman legion ceased to exist. But from that death came something new, something that might echo through generations. You're old now, older than you ever expected to be when you first saw Celtic warriors emerging from the mist. Your hands shake slightly as you write the evening report, a habit maintained more from tradition than necessity, but the words flow steady, all quiet in Nuevexa Hispana. Trade thriving, population growing, no hostile contact. The people prosper. Tomorrow there will be new challenges. There always are. Diplomatic missions, trade negotiations, the eternal struggle to keep peace between peoples with long memories and old grudges. But tonight, watching your grandson dance with his new Celtic bride while Roman pipes play Celtic melodies, you know you've built something worth preserving. The 9th Legion is gone. In its place stands something harder to define but easier to love. A community where the lost became the found, where enemies became family, where the edge of empire became the center of something new, not Roman, not Celtic, but human. The eagles may be melted, but their spirit soars higher than ever. As the years flow past like water in your aqueduct system, the settlement settles into rhythms as natural as breathing. You've become the elder statesman now, the living link to those first desperate days. And young people seek you out for stories they've heard a dozen times but need to hear again. Tell us about the first winter. Grandfather, they say, using the title of respect whether they're related by blood or not. And you tell them, each time remembering details you'd forgotten, the taste of leather soup, the weight of snow on improvised shelters, the moment you decided survival mattered more than regulations. The world beyond your valley continues its grand dance of empires and ambitions. But here, life moves to different music. Seasons of planting and harvest, children born and elders passing, knowledge preserved and adapted. Your scribes maintain chronicles in multiple languages, creating records that will puzzle future scholars with their casual mixing of traditions. On quiet evenings, you walk the walls, proper walls now, built with Roman technique and Celtic decoration, defending a people who belong fully to neither tradition and completely to both. The sentries greet you in whichever language comes first to their lips, and you answer in kind, because that's how it is here. Sleep comes easier now. Dreams filled not with lost eagles and dying men, but with harvest festivals and children's laughter. When winter winds blow through the valley, they find a people prepared, not just with food and fuel, but with the deeper warmth of community. The ghosts of the 9th Legion rest peacefully, their sacrifice transformed into something neither Roman nor Celtic imagination could have conceived. And in the deepest part of night, when snow begins to fall like memories made manifest, you smile, because you know that somewhere in Rome, scholars debate the fate of the lost legion, never guessing that their answer lies not in death but in transformation, not in ending but in beginning. Not in the clash of eagles and dragons, but in children who bear both symbols and see no contradiction. The fire burns low in your hearth, casting shadows that dance like history itself, fluid, changeable, and ultimately more about the living than the dead. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges and choices, but tonight, wrapped in furs that would have horrified your younger self, you are simply an old soldier who learned that sometimes the greatest victory is knowing when to stop fighting and start building. Sweet dreams, listeners. May your own transformations be gentler than ours, but no less complete.